I can't be the only one who likes Indiana Jones the Adventurer just as much as Dr. Jones the Lecturer. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the first film in the Indiana Jones franchise, the 1981 action-adventure Raiders of the Lost Ark. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Raiders of the Lost Ark stars Harrison Ford, Karen Allen, and Paul Freeman, and was directed by Stephen Spielberg. Set in 1936, it tells the story of archaeologist Indiana Jones as he attempts to find the powerful Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis do. A lot has been said about Raiders of the Lost Ark over the years, and I'll be adding my thoughts to that ever-growing pool, or perhaps well of souls, but I could start off by confidently describing this film as one thing: iconic. I realize that might sound a bit hyperbolic, and I generally stay away from language like that in my reviews, but this is one of those rare instances where the term is genuinely warranted. Regardless of whether or not you actually like the movie, nearly everything about this film is befitting of the adjective. It's a movie that introduces us to the iconic archaeologist-adventurer Indiana Jones, and serves as the basis for what would become one of the most iconic adventure franchises of all time. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a film full of memorable moments and components. That John Williams score, the hat and whip, the exciting action, iconic, and of course, iconic. It's no wonder this film has been so influential, inspiring countless other films and setting the new standards for an adventure film, tropes and all. When digging into this movie, there are so many places we could begin, but I think it probably makes the most sense to start with Indiana Jones himself. Although the franchise wouldn't start using the moniker in the titles until the second film, this is still very much Indiana Jones's movie. This is the film that introduced the world to the character, and what an introduction it was. And I don't just mean the film, I mean the actual character introduction moment within the film, keeping his face hidden until his iconic step into the light. And from that moment on, we're off. Not just on the adventure at the heart of the story, but on the adventure of discovering who Indiana Jones is. We get the occasional moment of exposition, but for the most part, we learn about Indy through his actions. We discover his thirst for adventure, we learn that he's smart and experienced, that he's both caring and badass. Right from the start, we can see that he's fallible. He makes mistakes, has faults and fears, but he's also brave and driven, motivated by both his love of archaeology and of those he cares about. Harrison Ford does an excellent job of exemplifying all of these characteristics, and more throughout the film. He's certainly played more than his share of iconic characters, but Indiana Jones will always be my favorite. Indy may be the star of the film, but Raiders of the Lost Ark has a number of other notable characters as well. The memorable, hand-burning, fly-eating villains who deftly walk the line between genuine threat and mustache-twirling caricatures, the entertaining and ever-helpful Sala, but for me, the standout has always been Marion Ravenwood. This was a fairly early role in Karen Allen's career, but she does a fantastic job here. All too often in adventure films, especially prior to this one, female characters were restricted to basically just being damsels in distress, whose only two purposes were to be saved by the hero and then to act as his love interest. Marion occasionally falls into these two roles here, but she is far from a damsel in distress, instead drinking, thinking, and fighting her way out of trouble, while sometimes getting an assist from Indy. Their romantic history is alluded to, and there are moments where romance threatens to come to the forefront of the story, but it never quite gets there, allowing Marion to remain independent as the self-proclaimed goddamn partner of Indy. The characters are important, but so is the story, and we're presented with quite the adventure here. Drawing inspiration from adventure serials of the 30s and 40s, the story focuses on the discovery and retrieval of an archaeological artifact, with Nazis and a race against time thrown in for good measure. Even though most of the things are kept reasonably grounded, this is a heightened, larger-than-life action-adventure. Like the rest of the franchise, this movie doesn't shy away from adding some fantasy into the historical fiction mix. As would become the franchise norm, the subject of Indy's archaeological quest is a relic with supposed powers. powers that just so happen to actually be real, which takes the dusty, exciting adventure and adds a sensationalized, fantastical tilt to the fun. The constant relic chasing does introduce some repetition to the plot, but it's largely concealed by the unique tonal blend of the film. It's got a fun, bounding action-adventure vibe with a good deal of humor, including physical comedy that sometimes borders on slapstick, but this is all contrasted by dark creepiness and extreme violence during other moments. This has always been a film I've thought of as a fairly family-friendly adventure, but there are some disturbing moments and brutal kills in this movie. The tonal range is pretty wide, but it possesses that decidedly Spielbergian look and feel that would become so emblematic of Amblin films in the coming decade. You know the one. Difficult to describe, but easy to recognize with its encompassing warmth and sincerity, in spite of what might be occurring on screen. Following in the footsteps of its inspirational serials, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a film that's continuously punctuated by memorable action. From the Temple Boulder Run, to the fiery Nepalese bar shootout, to the Cairo fight, to the truck chase, to the opening of the Ark, this movie's got exciting action sequence after exciting action sequence, often paired with John Williams' rollicking score. The practical effects, the stunts, all great, fitting of the story, but with just enough of that sensationalized, romanticized adventure of the serials from the time period in which the film's set. Some of the visual effects haven't aged quite as gracefully. I mean, I thought much of the Ark opening sequence was overly goofy when I first watched it in the early 90s, but that same scene offers up some of the most memorable and disturbing practical effects of the film too, so it all balances out. Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of those movies where you just want to list off all the things you like about it. A movie where a single scene, or even a single shot, like Indy's shadow on the wall of Marion's bar, is enough to warrant a whole paragraph's worth of time. A movie where a line of dialogue could reasonably spark an entire discussion about thematic relevance. It's a movie where you could never hope to touch on everything you want to talk about, or deserves to be talked about, during a normal length review. But it's also a movie where you really don't have to, because somebody out there somewhere has inevitably already focused on those things that you didn't have time to focus on. So really, what more can be said about Raiders of the Lost Ark? It's a classic for a reason. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one has got to be the characters. Really, I should probably separate this one out a bit, but I've got to consolidate, otherwise I'd have way too many pros for this to stay reasonable. The biggest component of this pro is, obviously, Indiana Jones himself. Harrison Ford is fantastic in the role, bringing the perfect blend of humor, charm, and believable skill to the iconic, globe-trotting archaeologist-adventurer. But the other characters are solid here as well, especially Marion. Rather than playing the damsel in distress role that's so typical of adventure films, including the very next Indiana Jones movie, she's a character who's more a partner to Indy than a prize for him. The second pro is the adventure. I realize this is probably a fairly obvious thing to highlight in an adventure film, but that doesn't make it any less fun. After some initial expository setup, Indiana Jones is off on a race against time. And the Nazis. This globe-trotting adventure has Indy deciphering clues and solving puzzles, all while exploring temples, tombs, and islands. Tracking down the Ark is only part of the action-punctuated adventure, and the incorporation of fantastical elements only adds to the sensational aspects of the story. There is some repetition to this plot, and it can be argued that the events of the film are inessential to its eventual outcome, but they still remain some really enjoyable events to watch. Pro number 3 is the tone. Maybe it's because of its PG rating, or maybe it's because of its fantasy-tinged adventure story, but I've always thought of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and all of the Indiana Jones movies, as pretty family-friendly films. It's a fun adventure that was part of my childhood, as I'm sure it was for countless other kids over the past 4 decades, and in part, that makes sense. It's fantastical in its action, has quite a bit of humor, is pretty clear-cut in its distinction between the good guys and the bad guys, but it's also got some surprisingly dark and violent stuff in there too. Melting faces, helicopter blade deaths, skeleton-filled crypts, not exactly the kind of stuff that screams family-friendly entertainment, and yet it still somehow manages to retain that distinction because of its tonal blend and that identifiable Spielbergian warmth and magic that hangs over everything. On the con side, my only issues are just minor nitpicks. It's easy to pick on the visual effects of a movie that's over 40 years old, but the Ark scene seemed a little goofy and overly cartoonish to me, even as a kid in the early 90s. But obviously, that's only a tiny element of the whole. Likewise, similarly small moments like the screaming and reaching crypt skeletons always stuck out as a bit silly to me, when compared to the rest of the adventure on display. Other than that, there were some minor pacing issues and repetitive story beats that would strain my attention as a kid, and still threaten to do so on occasion as an adult, but again, just minor gripes with an otherwise really enjoyable film. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Raiders of the Lost Ark or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Raiders of the Lost Ark 4.5 out of 5 paws. It's an action-packed and rightfully iconic adventure film, introducing everybody's favorite professor/archaeologist and featuring a slew of other great characters. This violent and comedic homage to adventure serials has itself become inspiration for decades of adventure filmmaking, and also for decades of people having the Raiders March stuck in their heads. I would recommend Raiders of the Lost Ark to anybody who wants a good adventure film, or really to anybody. There's a reason this film is generally considered required watching, and I realize most people have probably already seen it at this point, given its status, but it's worthy of a recommendation whether it's a rewatch or first-time watch. Raiders of the Lost Ark tells an exciting and highly entertaining adventure story, showcasing one of the most iconic characters ever created. And if that isn't enough, it kicked off an equally entertaining adventure franchise that has served as inspiration for nearly every adventure movie made in the past 40 years. If you liked Raiders of the Lost Ark, I would recommend Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Another indie adventure was an inevitability for at least one of these recommendations, given the character and style overlap, but I think this third film is the most similar. Not only does it bring back the Nazi-based threat and search for a religious relic, but it also features a similar tone and pairs Indy with a mostly capable partner. If you're looking for another fun adventure that was clearly inspired by this film, you might want to check out the 1999 version of The Mummy. It, too, features charismatic characters on a fantasy-tinged historic adventure with a tone that runs the horror-to-comedy gamut. And if you liked the clue-solving elements of this story and want a film that isn't a period piece, you should watch National Treasure. It's another film that obviously draws upon Indiana Jones for its adventure, tone, and story, but it also features a character whose primary motivation is the preservation of historical artifacts. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what movie features your favorite character introduction moment? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.